The second half of the 20th century was a thrilling period for European aviation, with some sweeping advancements being developed. But there's not a single family of aircraft that invokes as much awe, reverence, and pure astonishment as the Mirage family. Initially developed to rebuild France's air force after the Second World War, this family would incorporate old technologies in new ways, achieving commercial success beyond anyone's expectations and inspiring knockoffs and copies. The advancements made and the lessons learned within the Mirage family would lay the path for Dassault to develop the Jaguar and eventually the Rafale, but to figure out how it came to that, we need to go back to a time before the first Mirage was not even sketched. Just before we continue with today's video, a quick word from our fantastic sponsor, Vessi. Long-time friend of the show, definitely one of my favorite sponsors. We've worked with them for a very long time. I have a ridiculous number of Vessi shoes. They always send me the new ones, and I try them out, and I wear them around, and my wife is annoyed because I have more shoes than her, and my feet are always dry. Vessis are made with a material called Dymatex, which makes them waterproof, not water-resistant. You can go splashing through puddles. You can get wet up to here. If it doesn't go over the top, your socks are remaining dry. Also, Vessi sells socks. They sent me some in the last, bundle of stuff that they sent me. They're super comfortable and warm. This isn't in the ad script. I've never even told to promote the socks. They just sent them to me, and they're great. They're just great socks. I'm like, now I just want to wear Vessi socks and Vessi shoes. It's the only thing my feet have. They're Stormburst sneakers. That's these, by the way, the high top version. There's also a low top version. They're super easy to pull on and pull off because they've got this tag. They've got this great grip on the bottom, which is fantastic, especially right now because it is snowy outside. Whatever you're getting up to in these, it will handle them. And then you might be thinking, oh, well, summer will come around and then I'll just have these for winter. No, somehow, I don't know how. It's probably the magical Dymatex material, but they also, your feet don't get weird and super sweaty in them in summer. Like, you could wear this boot in summer and you would be fine. Also pair them with Vessi's gloves, which haven't arrived yet, but I will be shooting some B-roll. You'll see me give it a big thumbs up with Vessi's gloves. And you've got a winter kit that covers all of the basics: dry feet, warm hands, and touchscreen control, even when it's freezing out. And because of the holidays, Vessi's offering 15% off your first order, plus a free pair of forecast gloves with a minimum purchase. Free shipping, 30-day returns, everything's covered by a 1-year warranty. So, shop now at vessi.com/megaprojects. Grab 15% off, but only during the launch window, December 2nd to December 12th. And now back to today's video. France's need for speed. Okay, so in the 1950s, the French were more concerned with developing a new film movement than they were with developing their air force, which was in a questionable state at best. After completely failing to make any sort of meaningful contribution to the Allied effort in the Second World War, partly due to poor cohesion of air and ground forces and partly due to poor communication and simply poor tactics, the French decided to make huge investments in their air capabilities. At the time, the Air Force relied on Dassault's Mystère, Super Mystère, and Mystère 4 fighter bombers, Sud Aviation Vautour multi-role aircraft, and the de Havilland Vampire fighter. While all of these aircraft were jet-propelled, they were showing a serious lack of fighting capability in comparison to Soviet fighters of the era, namely the MiG-15, which was entirely superior to the West's best jets of the era, such as the Lockheed F-80 and the Grumman F-9F, with only the F-86 Sabre being able to compete with the legendary Soviet plane. After conducting a series of studies, the French Ministry of Defense agreed with its Western allies that they were all in dire need of a light fighter that can match the threat from the East. Other Western countries came to the same conclusion, which would eventually result with the British Folland Gnat, the American Douglas A4 Skyhawk, and the Italian Fiat G91. In 1952, the French government published a request for designs defining the new aircraft specifications in detail. It was to be a lightweight, all-weather interceptor aircraft with the ability to climb to 18,000 meters or 59,000 feet within 6 minutes, while it also had to reach Mach 1.3 in level flight. Aside from reinvigorating France's air force and becoming its backbone, this new aircraft would also be made available for sale to Allied countries. 3 French companies, Sud-Est, Sud-Ost, and Dassault Aviation, answered the call. Sud-Ost applied with the Trident, a very aerodynamically streamlined, shoulder-winged plane powered by a rocket engine equipped with a set of wing-mounted turbojets. Sud-Est answered with the Durandal, a delta-winged fighter equipped with a turbojet engine capable of afterburning. The prototype was, however, noticeably heavier than the Trident, which went directly against the basic requirement of a lightweight fighter, and it could only be armed with a single AA-20 air-to-air missile, a design flaw that found itself at the center of the criticism surrounding the plane. At the same time, Dassault's engineers travelled to Bordeaux, where the British were conducting tests on the Fairey Delta II, an experimental aircraft that never went into production, but it nevertheless left a lasting mark on aviation. In 1956, the FD2 broke the world's airspeed record held previously by the F100 Super Sabre by reaching 1,811 kilometers or 1,132 miles an hour, otherwise known as Mach 1.73. Dassault's engineers, impressed by the incredible performance of the Delta Wing airframe, collected additional data on the performance, which only bolstered Dassault's theories about the viability of the design that they were working on at the time. Mirage III, the first domino. Now, that design was labelled the MD-550 Mystere Delta, and it was the seed that would eventually grow into the Dassault Mirage tree. Just like the Delta II, the Mystere Delta features a tailless Delta configuration at a 60-degree sweep. The Delta Wing configuration, which some call just a triangle, would become a staple of the Mirage family, but it was originally a risky choice. The tailless Delta Wing configuration, seen with all Mirage planes, makes them incredibly efficient at high speeds, and its highly rigid structure allows for greater payload. Delta Wings have a large chord, and in aerospace engineering, the chord is the middle line stretching from the front to the back of the wing. A large chord means that the wing can be relatively thick in comparison to other configurations, which in turn keeps drag down, and this makes Delta Wings a great choice for supersonic aircraft. The large chord also allows Delta Wing airplanes to store a lot of fuel, and the large surface area minimizes the minimum speed that the aircraft can do before stalling. On the other hand, it isn't as maneuverable as a swept-wing airplane, and because of its lack of horizontal stabilizers, it takes a lot of time to take off, and it can't land at slow speeds, which limits its deployment to airfields with long landing strips and even using drogue parachutes when landing. Additionally, flaps are hard to integrate into Delta Wings because of the low thickness of the wings. There's literally just less vertical room in comparison to swept-wing configurations. Finally, Delta Wing airplanes bleed more speed during tight turns than other configurations because they create more drag, and that's not something you want in a dogfight. Nevertheless, Dassault decided to go all in with the Delta configuration, and this was, in retrospect, a really smart choice for commercial reasons as well, because Delta Wing designs are easy to construct, which makes them quick sellers. The first Mystere Delta test flight took place in June of 1955, reaching Mach 1.15. Then a redesign took place, and the Mirage I was born, reaching Mach 1.3 as outlined by the Defense Ministry's request, and eventually powering through that barrier and reaching Mach 1.6 through the help of a rocket motor. That, however, wasn't good enough, as the Mirage I fell victim to the same design flaw as the Durandal. It was too small and could only carry a single air-to-air missile. Mirage II was then designed but never built, as the engineers immediately spotted a few mistakes and moved on to the third design, the Mirage III. This airplane would be 30% heavier than the Mirage I and obviously larger, allowing it to carry more armament. Aside from that, it incorporated a rule that was brand new in aerospace engineering, called the Whitcomb Area Rule, which states that changes in the aircraft's cross-section have to be as gradual as possible to minimize drag. This is how the Mirage developed its characteristic WASP waist, a configuration we can still see with many supersonic fighters today. In 1956, the Mirage III reached Mach 1.52, and after a few changes a year later, it achieved Mach 1.8, blowing the competition out of the water. At this point in time, everyone in France was getting rather excited about the Mirage, as the design itself showed a lot of potential in other applications. Although it was originally supposed to be an interceptor, it had become clear that it could be a multi-role fighter as well as a bomber, with Dassault getting started on multiple specialized designs. In 1958, the first Mirage IIIA, which was the predecessor of the design French pilots would later fly, conducted its first flight, and a few months later it reached Mach 2.2, making it the first Western European aircraft to exceed Mach 2. 10 Mirage IIIs were produced for testing in France, with Australia also getting one, and in 1961 Dassault started developing the first of the 95 ordered Mirage IIICs. Dassault immediately turned its attention to the multi-role variant of the Mirage, which they knew would maximize the design's potential at the time. The design was dubbed the Mirage IIIE, and it would eventually become the golden standard for Mirages. It's this aircraft that most people think of when they hear of Mirage III, and over time 192 would be built and introduced into service, becoming the most exported version of the Mirage III by 1971. The final version of the Mirage IIIE is a single-seater delta-wing aircraft powered by French-made ATAR 09C afterburning turbojet engines that's capable of creating 9,440 pounds of thrust, which is boosted to 13,700 pounds with the afterburner. Comparatively, the turbojet on the MiG-15, which is the aircraft the Mirage was designed to combat, could only produce 5,950 pound force. This allowed it to travel more than twice as fast as sound at Mach 2.2, which translates to about 2,350 kilometers or 1,460 miles per hour. It also had a combat range of about 750 miles or 1,200 kilometers and a climb rate of about 16,400 feet per minute. This meant that it was more than twice as fast as its eastern opponents, which couldn't even reach Mach 1 with greater range and 50% greater rate of climb. The Mirage III could be armed with two 30mm cannons, two Matra JL-100 air-to-surface rockets, and either two AIM-9B Sidewinder air-to-air missiles or three Matra air-to-air missiles. The Mirage could also carry almost 9,000 pounds of bombs or reconnaissance pods on its 5 external hardpoints, with it eventually being adapted to carry the AN-52 nuclear bomb, which the French retired in 1992. With all of that said, the Mirage IIIe was outrunning and outgunning the Soviet MiG-15, which was the ultimate goal of the entire program. But the development of this fantastic bird was only the beginning. At the same time, Dassault was developing the Mirage IV, which was essentially the Mirage III strategic bomber variant. Although it came with a few upgrades, it's more of a continuation of the previous design rather than a separate design on its own, which is why it's often considered just another variant of the Mirage III. This variant, however, did cause quite a stir when it was first introduced. It's somewhat larger than the Mirage III, with the thinnest wings in Europe. Powered by two Atar turbojets, unlike the Mirage III, which was powered by a single turbojet, it could reach Mach 2.2 with ease. It's important to point out that the Mirage IV could exceed that speed, but due to airframe temperature restrictions, it was redlined at 2.2. It's also a two-seater, unlike most Mirage III variants, which are one-seaters. The Mirage IV could also refuel mid-air, an ability lost upon the Mirage III, allowing it to reach Moscow among other places, and the bomber could be armed with either AN-11 or AN-22 nuclear bombs, a medium-range nuclear missile, or 16 1,000-pound freefall bombs. 62 Mirage IVs were built alongside the Mirage III, and they were used exclusively by France, which used them to establish its deterrent force, known as the Force de Frappe. Interestingly, this is the trigger behind France's backing out of NATO's military structure in 1966. Charles de Gaulle, who famously commented on the Mirage IV, saying, "We don't have fighter aircraft, we have fear-inducing aircraft." He believed that since France had established its own nuclear deterrent, it was absolutely crucial its military decision-making was independent from foreign influence. Aside from nuking the hell out of a few small islands in the Pacific during testing, Mirage IVs were never used in combat. Dassault was designing all kinds of variants. The 3D variant is a trainer aircraft, the 3C is an interceptor with a better radar and longer fuselage, the 3O is the Australian bomber variant, and the 3R is a reconnaissance airplane. And of course, we can't forget about the 3V, the prototype of a Mirage III with VTOL capabilities. All of these variations, aside from the 3B, disappointingly, would be built for different customers. Aside from its use in France, Dassault would make bank on international sales, with Israel, South Africa, and Pakistan being their main customers, while Australia and Switzerland purchased licenses and built their own Mirages. Brazil, Argentina, Spain, Venezuela, Lebanon, and Jordan would all purchase Mirages, albeit in smaller numbers. The Mirage III would prove its incredible value for Israel during the Six-Day War, shooting down 48 MiGs. 48 MiGs in 6 days is insane on its own, but during the Yom Kippur War, Israeli Mirages shot down 106 Syrian and Egyptian aircraft, with another 140 aircraft being shot down by Israel's very own Nesher, which is Israel's design of the Mirage V, that's an airplane we'll get to later. Not only were the Mirages wiping the floor with MiG-15s on paper, they were shooting the 15's successors, the more advanced MiG-19 and MiG-21s, out of the sky as well. The design would, however, start showing its age during the Falklands War. In 1982, Argentina used its Mirages as escorts for its Douglas A4 Skyhawks. The only issue was, once the Mirages got to the combat area, they would be so low on fuel that they would only have about 5 minutes of flight time before having to return back to base. They only engaged British Harriers in direct combat once, and it resulted in the Mirage in question getting shot down. More than 1,400 Mirage IIIs were built throughout history, and every single one was a smash hit for about a decade and a half in the past century. The design filled a very specific space in the West's race against the East, but if we take a look closer to its place of origin, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It revitalized the French Air Force. Moreover, the international commercial success made the entire Dassault company realize that they must be doing something right, so they instantly started improving on their Mirage III design, branching out into two directions, one of which was the Mirage V. The Mirage V, the immediate upgrade. So the Mirage V was born out of Israel's need for an even more combat-capable aircraft. While satisfied with the Mirage III, Israeli military leadership recognized the potential for an even more dangerous plane and placed an order for 50 of them. Dassault started working on the Mirage V in the 1960s, while the Mirage III's abilities were still being explored, and one of the first changes made was the removal of Roman numerals in favor of Arabic notation. The reason behind this decision is not yet clear. Designation wasn't the only thing that was changed. The air intercept radar and its related avionics were also removed. The reasoning behind this was practical. The weather over the Middle East is mostly clear and sunny, making other aircraft easier to spot, which in turn makes the radar a bit redundant. When the experimental Mirage V took flight in 1967, it was noticeably different from its predecessor. It had a longer nose, which added about half a meter of length, and two weapon pylons were added for a total of 7, increasing the maximum weapons load to 8,800 pounds or 4,000 kilos. This same change would later be made on all Mirage III's, but the first fighter in the family originally had 5 pylons. It also had a better service ceiling and increased range by about 20% in comparison to the Mirage III. With all of those upgrades, the Mirage V was ready for delivery to Israel, except it never made the trip. Even though Israeli pilots traveled to France to train on their new daytime interceptors, President de Gaulle embargoed the sale after the new bird's maiden flight because of the 1968 Israeli raid on Lebanon. Officially, France never sold any Mirage Vs to Israel. Unofficially, it's presumed that France sold at least 50 Mirage Vs to their primary customers under the table. Israel then repainted the planes and added a few final touches, claiming that their new planes, named the IAI Nesher, which look suspiciously similar to the Mirage V's they were supposed to receive, are in fact homemade Mirage V's, which they built after acquiring all the blueprints through completely legal means. Whichever story you choose to believe, Neshers are officially considered part of the Mirage family, even if they weren't built in France, because they're identical to Mirage V's. 582 Mirage Vs were built overall, and similar to Mirage III's, they were a huge commercial success with Belgium, Peru, Venezuela, Pakistan, and Egypt, among others, all acquiring their own. The Mirage V would have offspring of its own called the Mirage 50, which came with an upgraded ATAR 9K50 engine, boosting the fighter's takeoff and climb rate. Mirage Vs would soon see action during the 1991 Gulf War, when Belgium deployed a fleet of 18 aircraft to protect Turkey against potential Iraqi attacks. Egypt lost at least one Mirage V to an Iranian F-14 Tomcat in 1986, while Pakistan remains the only active user of the Mirage V and the Mirage III today, and has the latest recorded use of the airplane. In 2019, India violated Pakistani airspace to bomb an alleged terror camp, and in a retaliatory move, 2 Mirage Vs dropped H-4 bombs before safely returning home, which is the Mirage V's latest engagement at the time of recording. Mirage F1, the odd man out. While developing the Mirage V, Dassault was simultaneously focusing its efforts in the completely opposite direction of a clear weather interceptor. The project was titled the Mirage F1, and while a successor to the Mirage III, this new fighter incorporated significant changes as it incorporated ideas from projects F2 and F3, which were ultimately cancelled. Starting from the most obvious difference, the F1 betrays the family by using swept wings instead of delta wings like everybody else. It's preposterous and treacherous, we know. The rationale behind this is based on the Mirage III's horrific takeoff and landing results. As mentioned earlier, the first Mirage needed very long runways to take off and land because delta wings don't perform well at low speeds. Swept wings, on the other hand, are still maneuverable at those speeds, and when talking specifically about the F1, its swept wings reduced the required runway length by over 50% in comparison to its predecessor, while the approach speed during landing was around 125 knots, which is about 25% slower than the Mirage III speed. The F1 also had a conventional tail, which, in combination with swept wings, made the newcomer easier to maneuver than the Mirage III. A huge upgrade upon the Mirage III that we can't exactly see with the naked eye hides in the F1's onboard avionics. Designed specifically for the role of an interceptor with the secondary role of ground attack aircraft, the F1 is equipped with the Thompson CSH Serrano 4 radar system, which was developed from the radar systems used with the Mirage III. This radar was capable of detecting targets at double the range of the previous models, while it was also used for ground mapping and terrain avoidance. The ATAR-09C used with the Mirage III was replaced by the ATAR-9K50 turbojet engine, which was used with the aforementioned Mirage IV bomber. While the F1 was only 350 kilograms or 770 pounds heavier than the Mirage III, the power of the new engine boosted the max takeoff weight to more than 16 metric tons, while the Mirage III maxed out under 14. This was only possible because the new engine provided the F1 with about 11,000 pound force or 49 kilonewtons of thrust, which is about 17% more power than the Mirage III ever handled. This would also help improve the new Mirage's service ceiling from 56 to 66,000 feet, and its climb rate would almost triple from 83 to 243 meters per second, which means that the F1 could reach almost 48,000 feet in a minute, while the Mirage III would still be stuck at about 16,000 feet. The F1's top speed is, interestingly, the same, Mach 2.2. This is only official, though. Both the F1 and the Mirage III could exceed their official speeds, but they were both redlined at around 2,300 kilometers or 1,450 miles per hour as a safety precaution. As for armaments, the F1 also had two 30mm guns with 150 rounds per gun and had 7 pylons for external carrying of weapons. It could practically carry around 8,800 pounds of bombs, rockets, and drop tanks, just like the Mirage III. However, if Command decided to throw practicality out of the window and just maximize the F1's carrying potential, loading it up with everything they had, this bird could carry 13,900 pounds of various weapons on its hardpoints. It would obviously be obscenely difficult and uncomfortable to fly an airplane with the weight of another airplane strapped to it, but it was technically possible. On top of its guns and pylon-mounted weaponry, the F1 could also be armed with missiles. Sidewinders were just gaining traction at the time, and aside from air-to-air, the F1 could also be equipped with anti-ship missiles and air-to-ground missiles. With that, the F1 was put together, a more easily deployable, more powerful, and better-armed heir to the Mirage III's throne. Of course, highly specialized iterations, such as reconnaissance or ground attack versions, were also built. Overall, 246 aircraft were incorporated into the French Air Force, with Iraq, Greece, South Africa, and Spain, among others, acquiring a total of 726 F1s over time. Today, they're still in use in Morocco, Libya, Iran, Gabon, and the Republic of Congo. And given that we're talking about an aircraft from the late 1960s, the F1's longevity might be surprising at first glance, but it makes more sense when you realize that this is by far the most battle-proven Mirage ever built. France flew them in combat and recon missions from 1984 up until the early 2010s. In 1995, a pair of Ecuadorian F1s shot down 2 Peruvian Sukhoi 22s, and in 1995, 1 Turkish F-16 crashed while dogfighting a Greek F1, while an F-4 Phantom was unofficially shot down by a Greek F1 a few months later, although the Turkish government refuses to confirm this. Iraq used their F1s extensively during the Iran-Iraq War, mostly for interceptions and ground attack missions. In this role, Iraqi F1s shot down the first Iranian F-14 Tomcat, with more of the same repeating for months, giving the previously feeble Iraqi Air Force a frightening reputation in Iranian circles. Overall, Iraqi F-1s downed at least 35 Iranian aircraft, mostly F-4s, F-5 Tiger IIs, and F-14s, while Iran downed 33 Iraqi F-1s. The F-1 was, by all means, a fantastic airplane. For its time, it was Dassault's main entry into the third generation of fighters, and for a short while it outperformed the great F-16 in exercises. In fact, the F-1's electronic countermeasure system would regularly disrupt the F-16, which meant that even though the F-16 was a better performing aircraft with a more powerful engine, the F-1 was more than a match for it up until the 1990s. The F-1, however, wasn't the pinnacle of the Mirage's evolution. That title goes to the Mirage 2000. Mirage 2000, the apex of the Mirage line. The arrival of the Mirage 2000 in 1984 marked the return to the classic Mirage delta wing design. But interestingly, this project was originally headed in a completely different direction. The Mirage 2000 started off as a side project during the Mirage G's design process in the early 1970s. The Mirage G is a sweep-wing prototype that was originally supposed to serve as the new French interceptor and ground attack fighter. However, it was incapable of dogfighting and more than 2.5 times the price of a Mirage F1 because of how over-engineered it was, and given that the F-16 was winning contracts all over Europe at the time, Dassault needed to develop something cheaper. And that something cheaper was the Mirage 2000, a design that would maximize the potential of the base Mirage philosophy while incorporating all the lessons learned in the past decade. Thanks to the delta wing design and the sheer size of them, the Mirage 2000 is far easier to maneuver than the F-16, its greatest competitor. The wings of the Mirage 2000 cover an area of 41 square meters, and at takeoff weighs about 15 metric tons or 33,000 pounds, which is a realistic but not maximum takeoff weight with some solid armament. The wing loading on the Mirage 2000 amounts to 77 pounds per square foot. The wing loading of an F-16 is about 110 pounds per square foot, which makes it noticeably more difficult to control, especially at higher speeds. Mirage III, V, and F1 all had much smaller wings, which also made them less maneuverable. Another neat trick Dassault incorporated in the design of one of Europe's top birds of the 20th century was blending the root of the wings more densely with the engine, which left room for more fuel. The Mirage 2000 can carry more than 900 gallons of fuel, which is 200 gallons more than the Mirage III, extending its maximum combat range to about 1,500 kilometers or 960 miles, which is 25% more than the Mirage III. But wait a minute, you might be wondering, if the Mirage 2000 is so much bigger than the Mirage III, shouldn't it be much heavier and, by default, cancel out the extra fuel? And that's a fair assumption, but the answer is actually no. The youngest child of the Mirage family is only 450 kilograms or 990 pounds, or one fully grown male saltwater crocodile heavier than the first Mirage. The engineers achieved this by following a very simple rule. Everything that doesn't explicitly need to be metal shouldn't be metal. Fins, elevons, various panels, and even the rudder were made with composites, saving at least 100 kilos. The 7.5-ton ruler of the French skies is powered by the Snecma M53 turbofan, which is also fairly light in comparison to American and British engines of the same era, and can produce about 15,000 pound-force in dry thrust and 21,000 pound-force with the afterburner on, which is about 60% more power than the Mirage III ever had. This allows the Mirage 2000 to climb at an incredible rate of 56,100 feet per minute and reach a top speed of Mach 2.2. Once again, as is the case with all Mirage designs, the actual top speed is much greater, it's just that someone at Dassault decided to insert a block to prevent the first scene from Top Gun Maverick happening in real life. Interestingly, great scene.
Just a little push.
Interestingly, the Mirage 2000 proved extremely capable at the exact inverse of high-speed flight. Unlike Mirage's previous children, the 2000 demonstrated exceptional control at low-speed flight in an airshow in 1978 when a Dassault pilot slowed down to about 190 kilometers or about 180 miles per hour at a 25-degree angle of attack, and surprisingly, he didn't crash. We've spoken earlier about how the delta wing design has huge trouble flying slowly and landing, and what the Mirage 2000 accomplished here is the equivalent of you sitting on your bicycle at a red light and somehow keeping it from just falling over. The Mirage 2000 was by far the most maneuverable out of the all Mirages at both high and low speeds, with greater range and the capability of taking off and landing from much shorter airstrips than the Mirage III, all while incorporating top-of-the-line avionics and, of course, a greater and overall better weapons payload. While it's equipped with two 30mm guns, just like all other Mirage fighters, the Mirage 2000 also comes with not 5 or 7, but 9 hardpoints for external weapons carrying capacity. It's equipped to carry Matra 68mm rockets, 18 of which fit into a single rocket pod, or an array of air-to-air and air-to-surface missiles. It's also adapted to carrying guided and unguided bombs, as well as France's tactical nuclear cruise missile, which was originally used by the Mirage IV. Among the many variants of the Mirage 2000, Mirage 2005F stands out as one to rule them all, as it incorporated electronics that older models simply couldn't dream of. Most of these improvements are due to new radar that came with the look-down, shoot-down capability, which made the fighter capable of air-to-air, air-to-ground, and air-to-sea operations. The radar could detect targets flying as low as 60 meters or 200 feet in its air-to-air configuration, and this allowed the Mirage 2000 to use the Mika missile, which is France's anti-air multi-target missile system. The pilot can fire 6 of them at the same time, just in case he wants something really dead. The new radar was capable of detecting up to 24 targets, tracking 8 of them, and guiding 4 Mika missiles at the same time, which made the 2000's fighting prowess incredibly efficient. The defensive capabilities were expanded as well, with 3 radar detectors, an infrared sensor, jammers, and new flare dispensers. All of these massive upgrades were introduced in 1997, and they were borrowed from the Dassault Rafale, one of Europe's leading fighters at this time, and a fighter you can find a deep breakdown of here at Mega Projects. Rafale's glass cockpit layout, which is night vision compatible, was also borrowed alongside its heads-up display and the hands-on throttle and stick controls, which minimize the pilot's need to ever take their hands off of the controls. The Mirage 2000 was first introduced into service by the French Air Force in 1984, and it would take until 2024, 40 years of service, for them to shoot anything down. France generally refrains from starting senseless wars, unlike some other countries. Russia. So it would take 2 Houthi drones attacking shipping vessels in the Red Sea for France to mobilize their Mirage 2000s and shoot them down. This was, in fact, the first time a French Air Force fighter shot anything out of the sky since the Second World War. All of those other Mirages were never used in active combat by France up until that point. India perhaps offers the best example of how good and reliable the Mirage 2000 really is. During the 2-month cargo war between India and Pakistan in 1999, 2 Mirage 2000 squadrons of the Indian Air Force flew a combined 514 sorties, during which they dropped around 55 metric tons or 121,000 pounds of ordnance on the enemy, proving instrumental for India's way of achieving air supremacy. France supplied Ukraine with surplus Mirage 2000s, and they are regularly scrambled to take down Russian cruise missiles and drones. On one occasion, a squadron consisting of a Mirage 2000 and F-16s downed 34 missiles and at least 100 drones in a single night. It's quite impressive. Aside from those countries, Greece, Taiwan, and the UAE operate the Mirage 2000, with Brazil phasing them out in 2019 and Morocco preparing to introduce them to their Air Force in 2027. The Mirage 2000 still doesn't seem to get the appreciation it deserves, though, and the reason behind that is just timing. Although it did serve a purpose in many militaries for a while, it didn't stay in the spotlight for too long because of the emergence of late 4th and early 5th generation aircraft. Even with all the upgrades Dassault came up with, the 2000 is still outclassed by the Rafale, which comes equipped with better sensors and better electronic warfare capabilities simply because it's younger. The Mirage 2000 is limited by the technology of its time, and this is most apparent when we compare it to a 5th-generation fighter such as the F-22, as the Mirage 2000 has absolutely no stealth capability, and it gives off the infrared signature of a blue whale in heat. Despite that, it remains useful in the modern era, not for air-to-air engagements or interceptions, but for air defense and air superiority missions and air-to-ground missions within defended areas. Another reason for appreciation is its beauty. The Mirage 2000 is the most aesthetically pleasing representative of the Mirage family, and there's just something about the rugged, simplistic, but at the same time massive design that screams late 20th century Europe and invites us to fly around the Alps. The design brought the Mirage family to its end. The lessons Dassault and the French Air Force learned while building and designing these planes would fire the spark that created the Dassault Rafale. Funnily enough, however, if politics and technology had played a few cards differently, this video would be twice as long, it's already quite long, as there would be a dozen Mirage prototypes that never went into production. The many Mirages that never flew. It would probably be possible to write an entire separate video about all the Mirage prototypes that never went into full production, but instead of putting you through that, here's a short breakdown. There's the Mirage Milan, which was developed in cooperation with the Swiss, who added pop-out foreplanes in the nose of 3 Mirage IIIs. Only 3 prototypes were built, and aside from the foreplanes, they had updated avionics. The concept was eventually dropped because the foreplanes somewhat blocked the pilot's field of vision. The Mirage Balzac was a VTOL prototype of the Mirage III, the predecessor of the aforementioned Mirage III-V. The only prototype ever built failed completely in a low hover, killing the test pilot. A year later, the now-repaired prototype flew again, only to once again fail in a low hover, killing another test pilot. The concept was then scrapped, and the lessons learned were utilized with the Mirage III-V, 2 of which were built but failed during testing. There were also Mirages F2 and F3, both of which were considerably larger than the F1, which went into production. These airplanes were supposed to be low-altitude intruders, which wouldn't exactly achieve high speeds, which are normally what you'd expect from a Mirage. The French Air Force ultimately showed no interest in either side of the designs and opted for the F1, which was, as we learned, a huge success. The design of the F2 did, however, introduce the already mentioned Mirage G, 3 prototypes of this sweep-wing airplane were built, but the first one crashed during a test flight after a complete loss of electrical power. The Mirage G8 was then built, an upgraded version of the Mirage G, but it was ultimately too expensive, and the program was cancelled, with only 1 prototype surviving to this day, as the only remaining plane crashed in 1971. Finally, we have the Mirage 4000, otherwise known as the Super Mirage, which is essentially a Mirage 2000 on steroids. Almost twice the size of a Mirage 2000, this fighter was designed to be a dedicated fighter-bomber and long-range interceptor. In the early 80s, however, the Saudi Air Force ordered Panavia Tornadoes, which fill the same Super Mirage-shaped hull, and Dassault decided to focus on the Mirage 2000, as it would perform better commercially. This prototype recorded the greatest top speed of any Mirage fighter at Mach 2.3. Aside from Mirages that never were, there are also at least 4 fighters or prototypes designed by other countries which are just outright copies of the Mirage's blueprints. The oldest is the aforementioned IAI Nesher, which is Israel's version of the Mirage V. Only 61 were ever built, and Israel quickly pivoted this design into the Kafir, which is based on the Mirage V, but with Israeli avionics and a General Electric J79 engine. Given that it was much younger and incorporated newer technology, the Kafir actually outperformed the Mirage V that it was based on and did fairly well commercially, with Israel selling it to Colombia, Ecuador, and Sri Lanka, and then loaning them to the United States to use them as mock enemies in air combat training. South Africa then decided to make its own copy, incorporating both Nesher and Kafir designs, with Israel providing South Africa with some Kafirs and Neshers for them to turn into what's today known as the Atlas Cheetah. This makes the Cheetah an amalgam of South African experiences, with the Mirages III and V combined with 2 designs which were, to put it lightly, copied from existing Mirages. While copying someone else's work to such a shameless degree that you're not even trying to hide it is certainly a bit humiliating, we can take this as a testament of the Mirage's prowess. The Delta Wing concept ruled French skies for half a century and achieved fantastic international commercial success, proving its worth in combat all across the globe time and time again. It also easily completed its primary objective, the reason the very first Mirage III was designed. It revitalized and strengthened France's air force, bringing it up to par with the world's top air forces. It was eventually beaten by time and new technology, a destiny that awaits every fighter, but it nevertheless left a lasting mark on the world of combat aviation. Thank you for watching.